year. This was probably 2011, 2012, somewhere in there, right here in Gasoline Alley in the month of May. And I'm trying to tell Derek about what the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was in like the 70s and the 80s during my childhood. And I mean, how do you explain that to people, right? I mean, you're trying to tell people about everything that took place out here, and you know, there's an incredulous like look on his face. And I said, well, you know, Derek, there was a time, like, you think the troughs are bad in the men's bathroom? Like, that's like the Westin compared to what it used to be. And he's like, what are you talking about? Well, I can see these two guys in the background that were kind of in the peanut gallery of our audience. And they were there every day. These two guys were there every day, listening to our show just as they were out watching practice at the track. So one of them comes up and says, hey, I got a photo that you need to see that illustrates what you're trying to tell your little buddy here. So he shows the photo, and I'm thinking to myself, I mean, I know this place is still like kind of like the Mardi Gras of the Midwest, but this dude is showing me a picture of him and his buddy like sitting down on the toilet in turn 3 from 45 years ago, like in the same capacity that little old ladies on an airplane show you a photo of their grandkids, right? Like, you cannot be more proud. And so I'm like, well, that's cool, you know? So I showed Derek, I'm like, hey, Derek, like here's pretty much what we're talking about. And I mean, literally, instantly, Derek is like in complete shock. So every year, these two guys would come back. And every year when they'd come back, the first thing they'd do, and the photos that they would bring of this incident would get bigger each year, right? To the point where now they've got like poster boards, like, here you go, showing Derek the picture. So it became kind of like this legend within our radio show. And every year they'd come, and that was really the only time I got to know Dick and Doug was during these practice days when we were doing our radio show out here at IMS. And so they would come up after the show, and I'd always talk to them. They would stay until the end of our show when we were leaving. And there's kind of a magic of leaving the Speedway after the practice is over and everything goes quiet, and you know, you're one of the last people in there. So I'd walk out with Dick and Doug, and that's how I got to know them. And so they told me all about the Dogs of Musselman, right? And the whole tradition they had of being the first ones to crash through the North 40 and get into turn 3. And, you know, they showed me the photos of all the hijinks that took place. And, you know, my first thought that I was thinking was, well, you know, you guys are actually the reason I wasn't even allowed to come to the race until 1991, right? Because my dad was like, you are not coming until you're at least like 9 years old, because you ought to see what these guys do. So then, I'm meeting these guys, and I realize, you know, they're kind of legends, right? So the thing that makes the Speedway so great, and the thing that makes calling the race so great, and having the pleasure of broadcasting the race out here and doing practice sessions that, you know, that I'm obviously very fortunate and I know to do, is the characters. This place is full of characters. 285,582 permanent seats and 285,582 total characters and unique stories. But you meet some of them that you realize these characters are pole position characters. And that was Dick and Doug. And so one day, after probably 10 years of them coming to our show, I said to them afterwards, we're leaving, and I said, hey guys, have you ever been in the Pagoda? And of course they chuckled, you know, the Pagoda? I mean, we used to buy a 74, you know, Nova just to crash through the gates and try to get in here to sit in turn 3. We've never been to the Pagoda. I said, well, let's go to the top of the Pagoda. So we get in the elevator, and we go to the top of the Pagoda, and Dick and Doug are looking at each other like, you know, hey, we're from Northwest High School, and here we are. We're going, I remember Dick saying, we've gone from the outhouse to the penthouse. Like, we showed him a picture of the outhouse, and now that earned us a right to the penthouse, is what he said. So we got up to the top, and these two guys were like kids at their first Dodger game. Me at my first Indianapolis Indians game. Me the first time I came to the Speedway. They instantly were just bewildered, like they were in magic heaven, right? And so for me, I think it's funny because, like Joe was talking about, you know, you try to do something nice for somebody. Well, they were doing something nice for me. Because the level of appreciation they had to be up there and the level of joy it brought them gave me that moment to realize that something to me that can kind of become a job is actually something that I realize is full of a joy, right? And that was a gift that they gave to me, which I always appreciated. Now, the neat thing about that was I took them up there because it was Dick's 50th Indianapolis 500. And I hate saying this part of it, but that off season is when Dick passed away. And shortly thereafter, Derek and I were laid off from our radio show, and I'm fairly convinced it's because when Dick passed away, we lost one half of our audience, so they realized it was not a good trend that we were setting. But an interesting thing happened. The next year, in the off season, Doug had reached out to me and said, man, and he told me all about their story of the dogs of Mustman, and asked me, I was writing columns on IndyCar.com. And I get approached from a lot of people, I mean, I'm very lucky in that regard, about their stories, right? But certain stories resonate to you, and you're like, this story is better than just being told to 100 people, and everyone needs to know this story. So he had me write, and I wrote a story about the dogs of Mustman, or he asked me to, for the IndyCar website. And that was in the off season after Dick had passed away. And so I didn't know if I'd see Doug at the track, because I knew that this track and this event meant, Dick was the one that brought Doug here originally to come see the race. And I knew what it meant for both of them to be able to enjoy the festivities with the other. And so I'll never forget, it actually wasn't immediately following when we got laid off from our job. So we were out there doing it the next year, and lo and behold, we're there doing the show on practice day. And I remember thinking to myself, it's really a shame that we don't have Dick here to bring the photo to taunt Derek of the two of them in turn 3 in like 1977 using the bathroom. And I look up and there's Doug. And he was there with his Indians hat. He always had on his Indianapolis Indians hat and his little cooler. And, I knew that it was hard for him. I knew that it was probably mentally anguishing for Doug to be at the track without Dick. But I also knew that what I was seeing was a true illustration of loyalty and tradition and love. And the other thing that was interesting to me was, I went up and talked to him, and then we walked out together as we do, and we'd shoot the ball and we'd talk about the race and the traditions, and he'd tell me more about all the things that some of you guys did, which I've been sworn to secrecy to never reveal to anybody, so I won't say now. But, the one thing I remember asking Doug that I'll leave with today is, I asked him once, I said, so Doug, man, you grew up, he lived on the northeast side at that time, not far from where I grew up, and I knew that he was from the area, and I said, so, do you have kids, and, I know you've been married, how many kids do you have? And he said, well, I don't have kids, nor do I. So we talked about that briefly, and, it was interesting after the fact, quite frankly, when I learned that he had 1,000 kids, all over. And I think that that's the true beauty of being a good soul, is when you don't have to advertise that that's what you are, and it's relevant and it's seen and it's illustrated after you're gone. And so this year, when I go up in a couple of weeks to climb up into turn 3 to do the race once again, I'll mention Doug. I mentioned Dick at the broadcast, on the broadcast after he passed away. I'll mention Doug. And I'll actually look down. I'll do the same thing I've done ever since he told the story. I'll look down and I'll try to find some spot in the fence and think to myself, those guys gunned a piece of crap car right through that thing, just right down here, which is pretty darn cool. And to be able to have those stories about yourself carry on and be talked about after you're gone, and to see your work after you're gone, is something we should all strive for. So in the spirit of Joe, have a toast for Doug and do something nice for somebody. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
At that time,